And this week we're going to be discussing chapter 3, which is socialization. When we're discussing socialization, how do we get socialized? Who socializes us? And when does socialization start? Does socialization start from the time of being conceived, or is it time from when we're being born? So we'll kind of get into the aspects of different type of socializations in regards to how it's all related. This chapter starts off in regards to influences in regards to our social environment, and they do studies in regards to twins awfully a lot. Twins is kind of like a hierarchy in regards to how they socialize with one another and why they do the certain things that they do, and how they interact and engage in that type of aspects. They did identical twins in regards to their genetic makeup. However, if you separate these identical twins from the time of being born, what is their socialization like environmental wise? They're very different in regards to the upbringings and how the parents socialize them. How do they um, engage with them? How do they act? How do they communicate with them language wise? How do they, the nature versus nurture type question type aspects? Your book give you a good, you know, explanation in regards to twins. It took the two twins, not these two in particular in the picture, but it took two male twins, identical twins, parents separated. So one parent took one, the other parent took the other. And when they did their study, they found that because of the environmental and how they were socialized, they had very different upbringings, and their identity was only genetic. A lot of times, when you keep your siblings together, when you keep identical twins together, they do more things in increments and sequence and stuff like that, and more towards sync and unison. But when you separate it, they lose that unity, and they learn to socialize independently, and they have different demeanors, different aspects, different type of language, different ways how they act in society. So society kind of makes us human in regards to this aspects, right? We do have, feral children, we do have isolated children, and they do exist. So don't think they don't exist. They do exist. When we're looking at us, society can either make us, like I said, a feral child, which is being assumed to have been raised by animals, isolated children. Yeah, they may be in a situation of where they are with their family, but maybe they're isolated socially wise. There's institutionalized children, children that might be in orphanages, or that type, orphanage, some type of different type of home living type aspects, group homes, that type. They actually did experiments in regards to deprived animals to prove that society kind of makes us human. If you lack a certain connection somewhere, you're going to not know how to function in society. So our socialization is key. So when we're looking at isolated children and we're looking at the development in regards to the aspects, and what we're looking at is that when it comes to isolated children, language is what is required to develop. You have to have some type of language. If you're not able to speak, you can't communicate, and you're not going to know how to socialize yourself within in a natural environment. When you're looking at culture, it makes us human. We have a language where if you're unable to speak, how do you communicate? There's sign language, there's hand movements, there's gestures, there's all types of these things that help us with language. So language, when it comes to isolated children, it is a huge vital thing that needs to be done. Throughout all the researches that have been done, they've even done in regards to isolated um, children that are institutionalized. They did from a skills and dies experiment. They wanted to see between a high intelligence depends on early close relationships, that early close social connection that people have. They confirmed the data with the Romania's orphanage, and what they ended up doing was they took this experiment and they split these kids up And one group got like the bare minimum of attention of, speaking to and talking to, coddling, that type of aspects. They were just basically got their needs met of diapers changed and bottle feedings. The other group got more of the coddling, the talking to, the diaper feeding, more of the attention, and they found that it confirms the aspects in regards to that language, that communication develops a higher IQ in regards to children from the time of infancies. So it's that bond, that social type aspects that kind of helps us keep, motivating, to kind of makes us learn more. We engage more, we talk more, whether if you're introvert or extrovert, that doesn't matter, but you still get that social attention. You still learn that language. At the time of human development, it is key. Jeannie is a good example of this one. She was born to a 70-year-old father who hated kids, hated. Um, he was 70. Jeannie was discovered, oh, excuse me, Jeannie's father, 70-year-old, when Jeannie was discovered in 1970. So she was born in 1970. Dad was 70 years old. He hated children. Um, he was probably the cause of the death of her two siblings. There's no proven evidence in regards to that. Her 50-year-old mother was partially blind, frightened of her husband, terrified of him. So when it came down to it, Jeannie was more or less like institutionalized. She was extremely isolated. She was basically put into her room. She couldn't speak. She didn't know how to chew. She was unable to stand upright. She could not stand, straighten her hands, her legs. During her intelligence test, when they did find her, she only had a level of an IQ level of 1, of a 1-year-old. After intensive training and learning and walking and learning how to, put stuff together and make sentences together and stuff like that through it, like extremely training, her language remained predominantly as she grew, but it was one of those situations to where it was very difficult for her to do it because she was older. So at the age of 21, she was actually sent to an adult home, who cannot live alone because she couldn't function. She wasn't talked to, she wasn't taught how to eat, she wasn't taught how to function, she wasn't taught how to toilet. She was actually strapped to a toilet. That she's why she couldn't stand upright. So, when it comes to this, and you can see the lack of communication can actually deprive a child from being very intellectual, type aspects. So they, confirm the studies through both, aspects in regards to it. When you're looking at an orphanage and you're looking at the development, these are kids sleeping in India in a dormitory. These kids are basically in a hallway because it's overpopulated, and there's such a, consequence in regards to this. There might be, 1 to 2 or 1 to 1, adult care relationship development. However, these kids probably have more relationship with the dog that's sleeping on the floor with them than they do the actual human that may pass by every now and again. They lack that connection because there's how many kids versus how many adults, that might be the function of it, right? um, the way how kids are treated affects their ability to function as adults, their ability to reason and relate to others. They're able to relate to one another because they have a common sense, but to relating to an adult or understanding what they're supposed to do as an adult, they can't relate to that. Not unless if something changes for them, like they get adopted and they're no longer an orphan. So there's a lot of aspects when we're looking at institutionalized children in regards to showing and expressing that language has that key factor in regards to making it important. In regards to deprived animals, they did an experiment with Harlow's experiment with monkeys. It actually confirmed. You can see the photo here in regards to it. They had this monkey. They isolated it from the normal population. They made up this makeshift of a mom. As you can see, it's pretty much just mesh and carpet. Um, and the data confirms the same thing. Isolated with humans, the same thing happens with animals. If you take them away from their normal socialization, they don't know how to socialize within their normal environments. So once this monkey was at the proper age, because he was taken away from the normal civilization type aspects, when he was put back into population, he did not know how to act normally. So he had a hard time with the same thing with socialization. He didn't know how to be a typical monkey, didn't know that, going through the fur and picking for, the insects that it might be within is a normal thing to do because he didn't learn it from his mom. That's part of their language, that's part of their socialization. So it's kind of the same aspects. So when you're looking at socialization, it's basically the process in which people learn the characteristics of their groups, the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, the values, the norms, right? The rules, the regulations, that type of thing. The actions thought to be appropriate for them as well. But at the same time, if you think about it, is everybody's actions the same way? Each family unit develops and organizes and develops in its own certain way. So we still have a socialization, we still communicate a certain way, we still develop the language, but we also get socialized knowledge wise, skills wise, attitude wise, values and norms at a different rate and different levels as well. So when we're looking at the socialization into the self and the mind, how does our self, how do we reach this ideal of what we are, what we should be, right? So Cooley came up with this term, and this is Charles Cooley. He came up with a term in regards to how do we develop our self-concept. He coined the term looking glass self, and it's basically just refers to the process by which our self develops through the internalized of others' reactions to us. We know how to adjust. If someone turns around and walks away from us from a conversation, we take that as doesn't mean to follow the person, it just means the conversation ends, move on. So we kind of learn to develop that self concept, right? We imagine how we appear to those around us. We want to make sure we print off the best appearances possible. We interpret the way how others interact with us and how others reacts or the reactions to from others. um, if you've ever walked into a room and people are laughing and then all of a sudden they get quiet, your looking self glass or your looking glass self automatically gets a self concept of they're talking about me. It's something that we've done from when we were a child. It's a development that we do. It's kind of more of a defense. It's our sense of self-development type aspects. But at the same time, it's our self-concept and how we feel around those around us, or the reactions that people are giving. So we have a tendency to kind of imagine or overinterpret in regards to what people are really acting like. So keep that in mind. Charles Cooley is the one that coined the term looking glass self. But when you're looking at it, Mead kind of came up with this model of kind of going, okay, I get this selfing, this looking glass self, where we imagine how we appear, we interpret our reactions, we, develop our self concept. But Mead said, okay, well, we take on this role taking as well. Um, we take on the role of others. We put ourselves into somebody else's shoes. We understand how that someone else feels. We empathize. We sympathize. Right? We have to generalize it. Where do we learn that from? We had it, and we have an essential part of learning. Basically, on a full-fledged member of our society is usually our parents. Right? We're first able to take on the role of a significant other, as the child is doing here, later develop the capacity to take on the role of the generalized of others. So once he gets older, he knows, hey, I have facial hair, that means I need to shave because he learned it when he was a kid. So we're able to cooperate that into other controls of antisocial desires as well. So we learn to generalize some of our rules that we modeled throughout our lives. We developed a self-concept in regards to how do we supposed to do something. So Mead kind of came up with this learning of role type aspects. In stage one, he said, okay, children from the age of 3, they really have no sense of self-imitate, of others. I have, 2 grandgirls that run around here and they're like little, parrots and mockingjays around here, and they mimic just about anything and everything, right? Especially from older to younger, they imitate. But if you think about it, kids learn to imitate what? They eye gaze from when they're born. Well, it's not something they learn, it's just something they developed. But by the time of stage 2 comes around, they develop this play type aspects. From about 3 to 6, they develop this pretend play type aspects. If you ever see a little kid play, Barbies, or play with Spider-Man or Batman or G.I. Joes, whatever it might be, they're role playing. They are that character at that point in time. Girls, you might have played dress up, but being a princess, find whatever you can to make your cloak, or boys, your Spider-Man, you got the web spitting out from your hands, whatever it might have been, and thinking you could climb walls or fly from building to building, jumping from couch to couch. That might have been a bit your imagination, that your pretend play type aspects. When we get to stage 3, this is like team games. This is about the age of 6 to 7. We learn to organize play. We learn to take on multiple roles. And this type aspects, a lot of times they use the eulogy of sports. If you have a role to play as a first baseman, you are to play a first base person. You are expected to do that job. If you are a pitcher, you are a pitcher. You're expected to do that job. That is a role that you need to play. However, throughout a baseball game, if you guys don't know, pitcher can't do all innings, because if they did, they blow out their arm. So they have to switch the roles. Okay, well, now I'm no longer a pitcher. I'm now going to be maybe second base or maybe right field, whatever it might be. Now you have to go play that role. So team games, you learn to develop that, taking on multiple roles. It's okay to be that multiple person, to be able to do different things. As you develop through your life, right now you might be a son or a daughter. That's fine. As you develop, you get married. Well, now you're a son and daughter, and now you're a spouse. Okay, now your life continues. Now you have kids. Well, now you're a son and daughter. Now you're a spouse, and now you're a parent. You can see how you take on the multiple roles as you get older. Same thing as a kid. As you develop through your stages, you develop different aspects. You develop different stage. So me and the role taking, this helps students understand the team generalization, right? Using the baseball is a good illustration in regards to why team sports. You'll see football as the example as well later as well. But sports is a very good way to kind of express in regards to how we socialize, how we fit in within society wise. Explaining in the concepts, everybody has a role to play. You have a position to play. You have a duty to do. That's the reason why, sports analogies are usually the best ways to go, because everybody has a duty to do. Everybody has a job to do. Pageant in regards to the developing of the reasoning in regards to why things reason the way they do. Pageant came up with a 4-stage model. The first stage is a sensory motor stage. This is from birth to about the age of 2. This is us understanding, like the sucking, the touching, the listening, the looking. We kind of wander around. We don't have our critical thinking aspects going yet, but we're learning to think. We're learning to understand. We're attaching meanings to things. If you ever, think of a newborn, the first thing they do is, if they grab something, it goes straight to their mouth. That's the sensory motor in them. That's that stage, right? Um, the pre-operational stage is from about age 2 to 7. During this stage, we're developing the ability to use symbols. We're understanding the aspects. We're, getting into this, development of not yet fully understanding common concepts, and such as like the size, the speed, and the causations of certain things, but we're understanding the ability of those structures. We're getting there. And then when we're looking at the concrete operational stage, from about ages 7 to 12, this is where we start, putting now we understand numbers and sizes and causations and this speed, and now we're able to take on the role of the others, and we can um, relate. We could, generalize those to, sports and that type of aspects. It's more of that concrete operational. It gives us that truth and honesty or justice type aspects. And as we're going through this, developing of self-concept, if you think about it, we're never done with our self-concept. We're always developing it. We're always moving on. We're, making this more of a bigger and broader thing. So when we're looking at the difference in between the models of Pageant here and Mead, Mead looked at it more of an approach from a symbolic interaction, where Paget looked at it as more of just the development of mind. There's kind of like, how do we generalize? Where do we generalize this stuff? How do we, um, give our perception of how people in general think of us? We develop that reasoning through Paget's aspects. So when you're looking at this, and when we get down to that formal operational stage, and this is that we can talk about concepts, we come up with conclusions, we general principles, the rules, the solve the abstract problems. This is, after the age of about 12, we learn that abstract thinking. However, as we're developing it, we may never get to this stage. Excuse me. As we're developing through Paget's aspects, right? This formal authorization to get to that concrete, that formal come to conclusions based type aspects, we may just never get there. It has a hard time. So know these stages. The sensory motor is more from birth to about the age of 2. It's more or less understanding. It's the first stage. Hint, hint, wink, wink. This is something you're going to need to know. The sensory motor stage is the first stage of Paget's development, right? So as you're going through, know that each step has a developmental of reasoning behind it. And this is just a picture of Paget and a Swiss stamp back in, I want to say, 1980s, 96, 1896 to 1980. So it was maybe 1970s, 1960s, somewhere in there. That's when the stamp was developed. It's a Swiss stamp. But as we're the global aspects of ourself and our reasoning, and like I said, we when it comes to our self concept of finishing, we never finish it. We're always developing ourselves. We always develop in regards to where we need to go, how do we need to do things, right? So self may never develop earlier than Mead suggested. However, stages not as distinct as Patience concluded, right? Some people seem to get stuck in that concrete of that third stage, so they never reach that fourth stage of that abstract thinking. So if you think about it, yeah, you could think of the concrete, you could know and understand and get the conclusions of certain things, but you don't ever move to that abstract, that fourth stage, that abstract thinking of formal operation of, like, really, why does something do, or why did I do, or that really deep thinking, that abstract thinking. So sometimes you never get there. And there's nothing wrong with that. Freud kind of had the same symbols in regards to the learning the personality, the morality, and the emotions of type of things. Freud kind of had 3 terms: id, ego, and superego. For any of you who have taken psychology, not sociology, but psychology, the Freud, or if you plan on being a psychologist or whatever, this is going to get embedded into your head. You will know Sigmund Freud, left and right and back and forward and everywhere else. But Freud more or less looked at from the culture within us, kind of thing. He looked at the developmental personality. When do we develop our personality? How do we develop it? How do we apply it to our sociological evaluations, right? So from Freud's point of view on id, it's embedded. It's our inborn basic drives. We want to, when kids are born, they always want to please. They always want to do something, right? It's our and embedded. Sometimes things just happen naturally. A child's born, they know they need to eat and they poop automatically. No one's told them how to do it. No one's trained them how to do it. That's the id, right? Inborn basic drives. When it comes to the ego aspects, this is a term for a balancing force between the id, your inborn basic, and the demands of society, right? This is the ego. And this is how we kind of do our checks and balances. It's called also a conscience in regards to it. It's to make sure that we understand it's the forces in between. How do we adjust ourselves in between what is our inborn basic needs and what is our needs from society? So we find a balance in between the two. The last one is the superego. And when we're talking about the superego, this is the culture within us. right? It's what is developed. It's the constant the internal norms and values of our social groups. That's the culture aspects. It's how do we um, utilize, how do we internalize, how do we make sure that our moral component of our personality, it, provokes our feelings in regards to certain things, so guilty, shame, break social rules, pride, self-satisfaction, all of these things, that's that super ego, that's the culture aspects. So that's where that comes into. So Freud's term for culture within the representation is that super ego. How do we sociologically evaluate all of this when we're looking at the id, ego, and superego? In centuries, it denies the principle of sociology, the factors of more of the social class, the income, education, occupation, kind of is our roles type aspects that kind of, they say that more of our development for our personality is in regards to that, in regards to how do we behave and who do we relate to and that type of thing. It's not so much in regards to our personality of development per Freud. So that's kind of how they looked at it from a sociological aspect. That's the reason why Freud's great for the psychology of development of the mind, not so much for the sociology aspects, but it still fits in regards to our balances between how we engage socially and how certain things that are embedded with us within our personalities from what we learn from our families, from our parents and stuff like that. And then here, shown here, Sigmund Freud from 1931, as he posed for his sculpture. Um, he's one of the most influential theorists of the 20th century. Most of his ideals have been discarded because they've been either replaced by newer ideals and types like that. But even still, for someone who has a bachelor's in psychology, like I said, it's one of those things that was embedded in me. So when it comes to Freud, he had a lot of interesting ideals and stuff like that for developmental personality. Um, but there are newer personalities of developments in regards to different levels for like child development and stuff like that that's come out. So when we're looking at Kohlberg's and the developmental and morality, Kohlberg kind of came up with different ideals in regards to his theory. He looked at it as, he still has stages. He had a morale stage. He had a pre-conventional stage. He had a conventional or post-conventional stage. So he had a pre and a post. And they're kind of still the same developments. It's just that it never took off to more of a demand in regards to the development of morality, because at the same time you had, Mead in regards to the symbolic side of things, and you had Freud in regards to the developmental personality. You had other, you had Pageant of the developmental personalities as well in regards to what stages of developments that you should be hitting. So he had a lot of criticism in regards to the research check and how it applied to the cultures type aspects and apparently there's no universal abstract way of figuring what is moral. So that's kind of where he got some backlash in regards to the criticism in regards to it, because you can't really research morality. Morality is kind of its own type of thing where it gets done. However, he did do research on development of experiments on babies to see who had morality. Babies and puppets that helped one another to find in basically interfering in regards to what the puppets are trying to find that the babies, even younger than the 1 years of age, preferred good puppets versus the bad puppets type thing. So he did do research in regards to that and found in regards to that type of morality. However, when it comes to culture and the cultural relativity of morality, babies do have an inborn sense of fairness to indicate that like language and morality is capable of hardwired and kind of in the brain. Um, so it's kind of one of those situations to where you kind of have to look at the the aspects of what you're really trying to relate to what is morale, culture wise, because every culture is different. So there's, you know, when it comes to language and when it comes to what is embedded in regards to laws and norms and that types of things, it does different. it has different variations from cultures, so it's very hard to find that morality across all universal levels. So that's where it kind of gets a little hard to kind of verify if the research was really true in regards to the aspects of do kids from the younger age of 1 can really understand, is it really embedded in us between, good and bad type aspects. So when we're looking at socialization of emotions, where do we learn these emotions? Are they embedded in us? Are they hardwired in us? And when we look at anger, distrust, and fear, and happiness, and sadness, and surprise, these are all expressing emotions. These are all universal aspects, right? We're able to pick up on if someone's happy. We can pick up if someone distrusts us. We could pick up if someone's sad. These are all things that kind of pick us up, and we kind of express in different ways you know um Here we can see each one of these individuals are expressing their emotions. Are these global emotions? We could tell the gentleman in the purple shirt is surprise. We could tell the little girl with all the oranges in front of her, from orange juice to orange to whole orange versus a cut up orange. Obviously she doesn't want orange juice, she's upset, she wants something else, right? The young lady to the bottom left, with the big old grin on her face, she's obviously happy, she's proud of something, right? The one in the blue shirt at the very bottom, she's obviously mad. We could tell by her expression on her face she's not happy about something. And then the two kids, brother and sister, that are sitting there, they're obviously upset because they got punished for something, right? These are all universal expressions. Nothing has to be said, right? It's all written on their face. It's universal. It's just the way how it rolls. We're able to extend those feelings and rules, and we understand from each culture what to do. We adjust our behavior socially to adjust to these types of behaviors or these types of emotions. So what do we feel cross-culture research? What they found through cross-culture research is that there needs to be a little bit more understanding on how our society affects what we feel. When you're looking at cross-culture, every culture is different. Your textbook gives you a perfect example. A woman in the US who's never been married, 7 years, right? It's a long time, had no children. When she finally gave birth, the doctor handed her her healthy little girl. She was overwhelmed with, joy, excitement. It's a feeling as a parent. If you're not a parent, it's kind of hard to relate to in regards to that emotion, that feeling, right? But then you have a mom who's in Zimbabwe, same thing, married 7 years, never had kids, finally has a child, gives birth to a healthy girl. She was overcome with sadness. So that's what they're talking about cross-culture research. Why is one US family wise, when you're talking US family wise, you're talking about over enjoyment, you're talking about excitement, but yet here you have somebody from Zimbabwe that is filled with sadness because she just gave birth to a little girl. Depending on the culture and how things are done, having a girl first for your first child is sometimes looked as disgrace because now it's, pity to your family. Your family goes down on the social class ladder because you didn't have the boy first. You only had the girl. So it's kind of one of those situations to where when you're looking at the whole thing, cross-cultural research, you can see the difference globally wise across culture on how expressions and feelings can, you know, change your emotions, but feel that feeling of how do we, that's not a universal. Expressions emotionally is one thing, but the feeling inside is another. So it's kind of like the developmental type aspects. So when we're talking about the self and the emotion and social control and all of that aspects, are we really free to express ourself, or express our emotions, um, or are we controlled by more of a social control type aspects, right? If we look at it in regards to like a really intense frustration out of devastation, desire, shock, you wanted, tear off your clothes and run around naked across the street, what would stop you from doing it? It's kind of like one of those things, are we really free to express what we really want? Are we really free to express ourselves? If we, from last chapter and chapter 2, we learned a lot about culture. For some, going to Mardi Gras, that's kind of being free, but at the same time, is that something you would do outside of Mardi Gras? So it's kind of one of those situations to where we're really not, we're really not free. We try to have some type of social control in regards to ourselves and our emotions. We try to hold them in check when we're in society-wise. We have certain expectations when it comes to family and friends. Friends expect us to be more, easy, relaxed, be what they know us to be. However, your family expects you to act a different way because that's how they raised you. They expect you to follow your culture, your values, your norms from that aspects. There's no disrespect in the house. You don't talk a certain way. You dress a certain way. You act a certain way when you're around your family. Your friends, you're allowed to be whoever you want to be. So we kind of have this expectations from different sides in regards to our social. So once again, are we really free from all of that? And when you're looking at the mirror in regards to all of this, that social mirror, when you're in the social type aspects and you're being viewed, if you're a female, you're expected to act a certain way. If you're a male, you're expected to act a certain way. That's that social mirror. If you're a man, you're expected to act like a masculine, masculinity. You're supposed to have that behind you. You're not supposed to show your emotions. You're not supposed to show you're weak. That type of thing. So that's the social mirror they're talking about. They're not talking about like anything else, like, oh, let me look at myself in the mirror. No, it's the way how you're supposed to represent yourself as a gender, as a culture, as whatever it may need to be. How are you supposed to act within that society at the time, that mirror? So, question for everybody is learning gender mapping. When we're looking at when we're looking at gender mapping, um, when is gender really developed? When is it really key point in someone's life? And if you believe it or not, you start gender mapping at the time of being conceived. As soon as a parent is able to find out the sex of a baby, you're talking 13 weeks in a pregnancy, you're able to find the sex of the baby, which is either male or female. You do this gender mapping, you start gender socializing this child by setting up a path for this life of this child. If it is a girl, believe it or not, you have a baby shower, everything's done in pink and purples. Just the way it goes, right? You just gender map that little girl's life. If you are, pregnant and you have a little boy, first thing that falls out from gender reveal is blue. Guess what? You're gender mapping that child. You're now saying this is a little boy. This is his expectations of what he's supposed to be because he's a boy. So therefore, I dress him in all the primary colors, the blues, the greens, all the darker colors, right? Where the girls get the pastels, more of the lighter colors, more of the frilly stuff. Even if you go into a Target, Walmart, whatever you may go and do all your shopping at, there is gender mapping within the clothing section. There's gender mapping done within the toy section. All the girls' toys are on one side, all the boys' toys, what they consider boy toys, are on the other. There's no integration in regards to the toys. There's no like gender neutral, as you would say, in regards to that. So our gender mapping is also known as gender socialization. We do it at the time of about 13 weeks of being conceived with a pregnancy. We're setting up that pathway in regards to what this child is supposed to act like. If he is a boy, he's expected to be masculine. He's expected to be a boy. He's supposed to be rough and tumbly and, play in the dirt and play with Tonka trucks and play with GI Joes, and females are expected to follow mom's role model of back in, the older terms of, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, and going to church type aspects, that nature versus nurture type aspects. So this is done at that time. So gender mapping is also known as gender socialization. When we're looking at this message and we look at through it all, we look at it through our parents. We look at it through the toys and the play that we do. Gay and lesbian families, believe it or not, it still is present within gay and lesbian families, but not as prominent. Within gay and lesbian families, they kind of tend to be a little bit more open in regards to letting their kids play with whatever they want to play with. as not setting set boundaries in regards to you have to play with this toy because you are a boy. So by all means, my daughter is that way with my granddaughter. It's one of those things. A lot of times that we buy, and I hate saying this, but I buy boy clothes on purpose and put her in them because I refuse, and my daughter refuses to dress her all in pink. It's just one of those things that we do. So it's to let her know that it's okay to be herself. She doesn't have to wear this social mirror of this femininity role. Where I have a niece when she was younger. She was a princess. She always had to wear pink. She always had to wear frilly things. She always had to wear purple, wearing green, wearing jeans, wearing black. She couldn't wear those colors because those were boys' things. That's how she was raised. So you could kind of see the difference in between the gender message that's kind of being given just by the way how the parent is interpreting for the child. So when we're looking at the family and we're moving into, how do we learn it through gender? We learn it through the family at first. We learn how to match our ideals, our attitudes, our behaviors to those that are expected around us. Your top picture is from Malaysia. It's a dad with his boys showing him showing the boys how to hunt. There's no girls there. It's only the boys. Your bottom right hand picture is from Zimbabwe. This is a mom showing the little girl how to take care of things in the village. This is how we cook. This is what we do. So you can kind of see how the gender messages from a global aspects can be extremely different from US aspects. So it's kind of one of those situations to where, you can unfortunately even look at Charlie Brown, you can see the gender message that's even given through there. Between Peppermint Patty and Charlie Brown, one's rough and tumbly, but she's a girl, so it's not supposed to be that way. So it's kind of one of those situations where the gender message of a family, it really starts from the family first. Here, um, no, this isn't a brother and sister. This is actually two sisters. In regards to how we can look at the culture can be diverse, and we can't really stereotype because they are girls and therefore treat them that way and that type of aspects. But on the right here, you can see one is a sworn virgin with her twin sister. The twin sister that looks more of the manly type of aspects. When she was 11 years old, she made the decision to take on the responsibility for avenging for her father's murder. So she took on more of the masculinity role type aspects. So as she took on that, she, sworn virgins walk like a man, talk like a man. She hunt with the men. She took up manly occupations just to show, that she was not the typical girl type aspects, right? So you could kind of see, and I get this from all my students, like, I can't believe that's a girl. Yes, it is a girl. It's just one of those situations. They're actually twin sisters. So it's one of those situations to where we tend to develop into a need of what we need for society wise. I mean, she couldn't remain looking like her twin sister and still work in the manly field, so her body developed in regards to what it needed to do. When we're looking at the same-sex parenting, before I get into the peer groups, but when we're looking at same-sex, gender's messages to their children, we might expect that the children are homosexual and heterosexual parents will learn different genders lessons and display different gender behaviors. The initial research found that it's a mix. Sometimes it is a mix, sometimes it's not, sometimes it isn't. But for the most part, children of gay and lesbian couples show less gender stereotyping. Like I mentioned, they don't show that gender stereotyping. They don't put that dominant, oh, you're a girl, you need to wear pink. You're a boy, you need to wear those primary colors. You need to wear those greens and blues and whatever other colors, right? Or, you're a boy, you can't cry. All those gender messages put on that pressure for that kid. So they found that from a time of infancy, if a gay and lesbian couple have them from the time of infancy, there's really no stereotyping. They're very neutral, they're very natural. But it doesn't have an effect on the child or whether or not if they're going to come out gay or lesbian. It doesn't, that's not the case. What it is, it's just to make sure that they don't end up with that that socialization, gender socialization type aspects. So when we're looking at gender message from peers, when we're looking at peer groups, girls kind of enforce this image of appearance and behaviors and appropriate for females, right? Girls want to make sure that their makeup looks good. They want to make sure that, they look good. They're dressing well and they fit into this popularity type aspects, right? That's that reinforcement image of appearance. However, if a girl sits there and says, "Oh, she's chunky, she's heavy, she's ugly," whatever like that, that's still that image that's still putting that in check, right? Boys, on the other hand, tend to enforce the interests of in ways of discussing sex and violence. I raised two boys and one girl, so I've heard it all. It's one of those situations to where junior high boys catch a glimpse in this action type aspects to where talk about movies and programs, and it talks about the violence in regards to that movies, and they kind of get excited about it and their interest in the ways they discuss things and stuff like that. And the other one is sex. Unfortunately, it's joking, it's laughing, and it's kind of like ha ha type things, but it's just to make sure they're kind of policing the masculinity aspects of a boy. That they're following that gender message from their peers as well. So they kind of still do it in their peer groups, even at an adolescent age. If you're a boy, then you're expected to do certain things or act a certain way. If you're a girl, you're still expected to look a certain way and act a certain way. Um, it was one of those situations I hated it when I was in high school, is the cattiness of girls, the gossip, the chit chats, the cliques, the this, that, the other. I'm like, it's not worth it. But that's that reinforcing the image, right? That's that appearance. And trust me, like I said, I raised two boys, played football. I've heard the locker room talk. It doesn't faze me. But it's one of those situations to where it's like, they do still police that type of interest. So it's kind of like one of those things. But the gender message even falls through the mass media, right? When we're talking about the mass media of things, television, movies, even cartoons, it sets up a gender message, believe it or not. There is this children cartoons use female to portray the less brave and the more dependent type aspects, the damsel in distress. Sorry, girls, if you love Disney movies, and guys, sorry, but every cartoon or every Disney movie has that damsel in distress type aspects. I think I've came across one, which is Brave, that doesn't have that aspects. But even certain movies, even certain television shows, there's a gender message across to just about every single one of them. Video games is another one. However, now video games is becoming a little bit more popular. There's more of a universal type aspects to look at it, but video games is now to the point to where there's now universities out there for graphics designers and how to play video games and how to get sponsors and what to look like and when to protest. And EA Sports is, I think, one of them, if I'm right. Just all these different things, Twitch, streaming, this, that, what other game, how to stay popular on it. But if you ever watched a video game, if you ever play video games, um, there's even a gender message within those. Now that women are starting to become more game developers and programmers, those images are starting to change a little bit, to where they don't have this fictitious body style of the big boobs, big butt, itty bitty waist, and show as many or show as less as possible on the clothing wise, right? It's one of those situations where video games is starting to kind of divert from that, and you could look at Tomb Raider in regards to that, where it's more or less of not that damsel in distress type aspects for the video games. Advertising, same thing. Advertising is huge in regards to early age, in regards to bombarding type of stereotypes and images and genders, and the average in regards to what you should do, what you should buy, what you should wear, what you should act like, what you should look like. You're developing that self concept from all of this: television, movies, cartoons, video games, advertising. You're developing it so you can kind of understand why that self concept never gets done, because we're going through as we develop this. As I look at this and I laugh because of the question some of the questions on here is kind of funny, because I'm one that does play video games. Is it wasting time? Is it just for fun? Is it just for fun? Is it improving hand-eye coordination? It's it's now culturally integrated and ingrained and respected at a university. Robert Morris in Chicago is actually one of the first nation schools to offer sports scholarships in video games. So it's kind of one of those things. Games and sports are awarded through scholarships. New positions in coaching and esports coaching, teaching these kids at the university level how to play these games, how to be successful, what to do, what to look for, that type of thing. So it is a developing thing, but at the same time, parents don't understand it. Parents look at it as it's wasting time. I've told you to do your chores 6 times and you yet to do it. Get moving, right? Sometimes parent looks at it as being lazy and being deviant at the same time. So, there is a gender message. No, video games are not just for guys. Girls play them too. So it's kind of one of those situations. Those are those different symbol type aspects, right? And labeling theories. So we're looking at the anti of socialization. We have the family. The family is our first point of how do we socialize. It's where we develop. It's how we learn. It's where we learn our roles more or less in regards to male, female, those types of things. Neighborhood is our second. Religion is kind of third. Daycare is kind of fourth, but if you really want to look at it, daycare can be moved up to second. Because if you're in a family unit and if both of your parents are working, you're learning a lot of your socialization through daycare as well. And then school. And then you have your peer groups and then you have your workplace. But as you're developing through all of this, family social class has a huge factor in regards to the type of work your parents are doing and stuff like that. Depends on your environment, on where you're at. Your social class is going to determine in regards to what type of activities you're going to be in, what type of play you're going to do, those things. If you're going to be more of an outside or indoor person, or if you're into sports, are you going to be able to afford to do those sports? So your social class has a lot to do in regards to that type of aspects. It gives it gives children the curiosity, self-expression, self-control, that type of thing. Punishment versus physical. If you're not going to be a physical person, then by all means it would have to do with your social class in regards to that aspects. Children that come from more of a poor neighborhood, these are children that are far worse than children from wealthy neighborhoods. There's not as much offered to poor neighborhood type children. It's harder for them to build their self-concept. They tend to become pregnant at a young age. They get involved with the law. They drop out of school. They see violence. They become part of that mental health, that type of aspects. Their mental health gets worse because of everything they see. So they're far worse in regards to somebody who's in a wealthier neighborhood, because they don't see all of the bad aspects from a wealthier side. When we're looking at religion, it's a foundation for U.S. morality. The way how they look at it is that religion is kind of something that should be part of your foundation. In regards to religion, should be about 25% in regards to important pools for family type purposes, and in regards to learning those specific doctrines in regards to if you're Catholic, Christian, Jehovah's Witness, whatever it may be. It has a specific doctrine behind it. It has a specific morality. It has specific values that you're supposed to follow and abide by to. So each one of them, so they look at the religion as being as part of the U.S. foundation of morality type aspects. So when we're looking at the agents of social relation, these are individuals and groups that influence our orientation in life. So you can kind of see how each one so far has a big orientation in our life. When we're looking at the participation in daycare, when your child is in daycare, they get tons of different personalities from other children, right? They also get the aspects of different types of behaviors. They get the um, different types of adult connection personality type wise as well. So daycare has a huge aspects in regards to the media attention, because when you're looking at it, how much time does a child actually spend in daycare versus with their actual family? So there's a huge teeter-totter in regards to that. They sometimes they develop this um, stereotypic, kids that are in daycare are smart, but they're mean because of the personalities they pick up from other kids. So it's just kind of one of those things where they're kind of looking at the research a little bit more to kind of figure out, is that truly the point, or is it just, the kid just kind of being rebellious, or is it just the personality the kid picked up from other, or is it maybe just the environment of the daycare in itself? So there's different aspects to kind of look at that. When we're looking at from the school aspects, we have this manifest function, we have this latent function, we had a hidden curriculum, and we have a corridor curriculum. When we're looking at the manifest function, this is it's the intended purpose for the formal education, right? There is a consequence, beneficial consequence to people's actions. We have the reading, the writing, the arithmetic type aspects. um, the latent function in regards to it is the unintended, right? The unintended consequence of people's actions. It's not something that is meant to, it's just it comes unintentionally. When you're looking at the hidden curriculum, sociologists have this ideal or identify that the hidden curriculum of our schools is a term that refers to the values, although not taught explicitly, are part of schools' culture messages, right? These are stories and examples that are taught through math and English, bring with lessons of, justice, honesty, democracy, that type of thing. That's kind of the hidden curriculum. It's there's also called that correlated or the corridor curriculum, which is extremely strikingly different. It includes the racism, the sexism, the ways to make money, the superiority type aspects. So there's kind of all these different levels within a school system. But if you think about it, each school within the US has a state curriculum that they have to follow and they have to do. So if you want to look at it, it's more of a less of a manifest function or a formal education, right? It's the education's intended purposes. The intended purposes is to make sure that the kids learn those basic reading, writing, and arithmetic skills. That is the main purpose. It's the intended purpose of schools. Beyond that, that's where it kind of goes into the different levels in regards to the latent functions, the hidden, curriculum, and the corridor type aspects. But schools are the extremely prime agent of socialization. Daycare and schools, these are the primary functions. Um, One of their functions is to teach children the attitudes and skills um, that are taught to need as adults. If you really want to think about it, how this is that stepping stone. However, nowadays, when you're looking at it, the students have Chromebooks, they have tablets, they do their work on these things. So how much socialization is really starting to that is still continuing and now in schools, because now they're not in group work, they're not doing things together. The only time they really have their socialization is at recess. And a lot of times those kids have that social awkwardness and really not understanding how to function with the other kids' attitudes and behaviors and stuff like that, because they kind of lose that connection. So when we're looking at the schools aspects, the socialization is dwindling down because it's becoming more of a technology based than a socialization base. So kind of keep that in mind as you kind of see some of this stuff as we're going through it. When we're looking at peer groups, these allow children a source of resistance to parental and social or school socialization, right? When you're looking at peer groups is something that we could kind of say, hey, you know what, I relate to you, I understand. We have a lot of things in common. I could be myself with you, so I don't have to be my parental type aspects, and I don't have to behave this way because school's making me behave this way. However, there is a side effect when it comes to our peer groups. The status of insecurity is already high in kids in the secondary area, like in junior high and high school. It's really high. It starts around sixth grade. Seventh and eighth grade is where it really gets hard for them because they're insecure. They're trying to find themselves. Gossip picks up, ridicule picks up. bullying picks up. All this kind of, inflames in regards to that junior high type thing. And this is where that insecurity, that self concept, where we're trying to develop our looking glass self, but at the same time, we have these insecurities in regards to those checks and balances. Like, oh, this girl doesn't like me because I don't dress like her, or this guy doesn't like me because, I don't play sports this way, or I don't play sports at all. So it bounces back to that femininity and that masculinity in regards to peer groups. It's those checks and balances that we kind of do, but it enforces that adolescent norm. Unfortunately, it brings it it either breaks you or makes you. It's kind of one of those things. It depends on how strong you are. Um, the insecurities, you have to develop them. You have to build from them. You have to learn from them. Unfortunately, with some individuals, it's very hard for them to do that, and those insecurities stay in place even through the workforce. As they get older, you have this anticipatory socialization, you have a mental rehearsal for your career, you have, your expectations of what you expect in your career, what you want to do. If you have a confrontation the day before, you mentally rehearse what you're going to say the next day to that person. And believe it or not, it's really going to depend on your self-concept in regards to how confident you are, whether or not if you're going to say it. Your ongoing socialization, the job becomes the greater part of your self-concept. If you are proud of your job, you'll be proud of what you do. You're you're proud of yourself type aspects. So you kind of go through this anticipatory socialization type thing. So it's a process of learning in advance and anticipation of the future roles of your statuses. So it's that concept. When you come down to resocialization, this is a total institutions, this is a degradation ceremony. When it comes to resocialization type aspects, the process of learning new norms, values, attitudes, and behaviors. This occurs when individuals go through degradation ceremonies. When you're going through a degradation ceremony, you're basically being um, ritual whose goals are basically removed. You're stripping away of an individual's identity, self-identity, and stamping and renewing your identity into a new place. It is a Garfunkel term for degradation ceremony. But what it is a lot of times is a good example to show you of a degradation ceremony is military individuals. They go through boot camp. They have to deal with certain things. They go through, recruit, they go through drill instructors, they get yelled at, they get screamed at, they have people yelling at them, when they're going through boot camp and A schooling and stuff like that, they're learning their traits in regards to what jobs they're going to do. They put them in circumstances to where it's a degradation ceremony to make them handle the circumstances that they need to be put underneath. However, once they're done with the military, who re-socializes them? They they degraded their ceremony, they strictened their self-identity, and they made them into this military person that they wanted. Who puts them back into society? Who takes all of things that they learned of their identity, of their self-identity? Who builds them back up to the new self-identity they need to do to re-socialize because they're no longer military? So that's that re-socialization. The re-socialization is that learning the new norms, the values, the attitudes, and behaviors to match a new situation in life. Military life versus normal civilian life, they're two different things. They're night and day. So a lot of these guys have a hard time re-socializing when they get out of the military. Some of them can't make it through boot camp because they don't like the degradation. They don't want their identity taken. So they have a hard time going from that aspects. So resocialization is, like I said, learning the new norms and values, attitudes, and behaviors to match that new situation. Degradation ceremony is basically stripping that identity, and basically making them become a part of a new group, new aspects. So when we're looking at socialization through life courses, we have life courses that we develop. From childhood to adulthood to, transitional adulthood to middle early years. So we have these sociological perspectives to life courses, right? When we're looking at childhood, it's from birth about the age of 12, child labor terrorizing children, industrialization, depending on what age you are nowadays, or where you live globally, if you're in industrialization or not. If you're in more of a tribal type aspects, you have a different type of aspects in regards to industrialization, right? But when you're looking at the conclusion in regards to the child labor type things, um, life courses is something we learn. We have this child labor, we have this developing of skills that we need to learn in order to become an adult. So in the older times, the child labor, you weren't required to do education. Now you are terrorizing children, depending on, once again, where you're coming from. What are you, where you at globally? Keeping children from going bad is, it's frightening, it's hard, it's one of those things. Sometimes, you end up with a kid that likes to terrorize other kids. It's one of those situations. It's them trying to find themselves, right? When you're looking at industrialization, which brought on that formal schooling, the large segments in regards to the population, transferring ways to perceive children. Um, Instead of going to school, think of, if you didn't have this industrialization, you had to work. If you weren't in school, you had to work, whether if that's working the farm, working the fields, working side by side with an adult, it didn't matter. You were expected to work. So this is that childhood type aspects. There's certain things that we're expected to do. During adolescent phase, this is that social intervention. You're trying to find yourself. You're trying to find what works. You're trying to find, you're creating gaps in between your childhood and your adulthood. You're not so much initiating riots. These are just grounds of self-identity. You're showing young people how they fit into their society. They're trying to figure out a way to, this is where I fit, this is where I belong type aspects. So it's not so much initiating riots out in the public, but it's just initiating riots within yourself to try to find out where you fit at. Transitional adulthood, which is about 18 to 29, this is adult adolescence. This is kind of where, you're finding a lot of individuals that are currently here, because nowadays in our economic society, it's one of those things where you're living at home longer and longer, to make sure that you're getting your education completed and you're able to sustain and live on your own. So as you can see by the bar graph here, over the time, you can see men and women staying home for a longer rate of time versus moving out as soon as they're 18, 19, or 20. Where back in the 1960s, individuals who had transitioned into adulthood was a lot higher at the age of 30. There wasn't a whole lot that were still remaining at home. Different times, different era, different economy, right? 2000 wasn't as bad, but as you can see by 2010, 2020 is probably even higher now. But if you're age of 20, you're not living on your own. You're still living at home. So that's what they're trying to show you, that a lot of people don't move out until they're in their 30s, to where they're doing their own thing, where they're young adults and are able to take on those responsibilities of housing and all their bills and everything else, because it's that transition. So um, it's that transition of leaving home, finishing school, getting married, having kids, financial independence. It's now being pushed to a little bit older. However, during this, adult stage, or this adult adolescence type stage, um, some postpone longer and longer. Dad and mom's basement, and you just find it's free apartment, right? Um, I'm sure I pull the class normally, and it's usually about half the class still lives at home, and they fall within that range. And to be quite honest, there's nothing wrong with it. So it's just one of those things. However, parents might give you a little bit harder of a time depending on how they were raised. So it's one of those situations. Your middle years, which is the age of 30 to 65, notice you have a split. You have the early middle and later middle. Your early middle are basically people who are more sure of themselves. Their goals in life are set. They're ready to go. They're on their life course. They got the career. They're developing. They're doing what they need to do. Right. They're stabilized. That's that early middle type aspects. As you're developing in your later middles, you're developing the, not so much health issues and morality, but you're starting to loom on them. You're starting to understand, your bodies are starting to change. You're not as young as you used to be. It's a little harder to do things when you're in your 50s into 65s, right? You're not as young, not as limber, not as eager to go and do things. So you kind of realize that, you know what, I'm getting to that age to where I need to start maybe possibly looking at retirement, that type of aspects. Your older type is your 65 and older. Once again, it has a new stage, and that is the transitional older years. This transitional older years is the 65 to 74, because now this transition, it's an emergent phase that the life courses between retirement and the people who are considered old. um, because this is a stage to where they're still capable of working. Maybe they still want to work. Maybe they still enjoy it. They don't want the retirement life yet because they're just not quite there yet. They don't want to say they're retired. They don't want to say that they're that old to say that they're retired. They still want that young feeling. So that is the transitional older years. It is a new life stage that seems to be evolving. Your later older is obviously 75 and higher. But they kind of also had to put this transitional older year in because we are developing and we're living longer versus living shorter lives. So our lifespan is expanding as well. So we have this lifestyle in regards to, because of our medical technology, our, wanting to still feel that youthfulness, we have a longer lifespan. So, how are we applying the sociological perspective to our life course and our social location throughout all these phases of our life course, right? The way how it is that if you developed and you've gotten your goals and you met your goals, your social class is going to change along the way. So how do you maintain to make sure that your social location, in other words, your income, your religion, everything else that falls in line stays within your social class when you retire? Or do you have to adjust it, and do you have to backtrack and go back down the social ladder? So applying that sociological perspective to life courses is to making sure that you are in the right state of mind and you're able to retire in the same excuse me, same type of social location as what you're used to, and that you stay within the social class that you're used to. Because if you remove yourself from those, you kind of just, your social integration had just changed, and now you're going to have to re-socialize and readapt if you don't do that. So socialize throughout your life courses. It makes you develop, and you develop different relationships throughout the way, and you learn how to different, associate your social location. So it really doesn't matter. You make sure you're socially integrated appropriately for when you're retired, so that way you don't lose that connection later down life. So are we prisoners of socialization? um, we're not robots, obviously. We are individuals, but we are kind of bound to socialization. We need that type of connection. For some people right now going through COVID-19, that's been pretty much, quarantined in their house for the longest time. Sometimes you get this itch of like, I just need to get out. Well, guess what? You're that prisoner. You need to get out. You need to socialize. You need to interact. You need to be out. Need to engage somehow, some way within the society. Whether if you talk to anybody or not, it doesn't matter. You're still engaging with society because you're not at home. So we're not robots. We have our own individual behaviors. It's hard to predict what we plan on doing. It's hard to predict in regards to what situations are going to happen in society wise while we're socializing, right? Um, each of us is actively involved in the construction in ourselves, right? So we are that individual aspects. So when you're looking at socialization, you behave the way you do because you've had this developmental stages throughout your life that's helped you develop into this person that you are. However, keep in mind your self-concept, you're still always developing it. It's never finished. So you're always becoming more of an individual of a person, and you're becoming stronger as you move through, and you're understanding certain things and your development at a different time and frame. But keep in mind that you are and you're not as a prisoner to socialization. It's just we as individuals, as people, we need that socialization within society. If you guys have any questions on this chapter, please shoot out an email and I will get back to you. Have a good one.